I can confirm we're now live.
Thank you very much indeed. Welcome to the Mental Health Health and Care Overview and Scrutiny Panel review of mental health on this day, 25th November. Welcome to all those who are either watching this later on YouTube or at the moment. This is a public meeting, so it's being broadcast. Please turn off your microphone and video and only turn them on if you're going to speak. Jen may put anyone on mic if they're on mute rather if there is a feedback or background noise, so please remember to unmute yourself when you need to. Please raise a hand to your hand via Zoom if you'd like to contribute, and don't forget to unmute and use camera when you're speaking. Please say your name before you start speaking. This evening we will be speaking to Philip Bell, the Interim Chief Executive Officer for Involve. Welcome, Philip. Very pleased to have you along. And I hope you'll be talking about the impact of the pandemic on local, voluntary and community sectors, particularly organisations supporting mental health.
Certainly will, Chair. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I'm just going to go through a couple of things. Jen, can we have apologies, please?
Yes, I've received apologies from Councillor Bandari, from Councillor Mrs Mackenzie, and Councillor Mrs Mattick will be joining us later.
Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest from those present? Nope. So if I can allow the panel to introduce themselves to you, Philip, before you start, I will start with Councillor Lizzie Gibson.
Hello, Phil. I'm Councillor Lizzie Gibson, Great Holland South.
Michael.
Good evening, Phil. Borough Councillor for Central Sandhurst, Michael Brossard.
Councillor Allen.
Councillor Nick Allen, Councillor for College Town.
Thank you, councillors. I'm the chairman. My name's Mike Gibson, as you can see in the bottom corner. Also, not only the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny, but also the champion for the voluntary sector. So I am very pleased to say that our speaker is Mr. Bell. Philip, please take us away.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And thank you first and foremost for inviting me today. I'm hoping to be able to share a screen with you. I'm a little more familiar with Teams than I am this particular platform. So hoping that it will work, but in absence of that, I sent this presentation across to Jen. So perhaps Jen can help me if required. Okay. Are people able to see that screen?
Yes, yes, I can. Yes.
Wonderful. That's hugely helpful. Thank you.
You might want to, Phil. You just might want to put it into slideshow view.
No problem.
If you can.
Sorry, my screen's just moved. Slideshow. Okay. Can everybody see that okay?
Yep, thanks.
Wonderful. Well, as I say, my sincere thanks for allowing me to come along today to talk to you. So my name's Philip Bell. I'm the interim CEO for Involve Community Services. I've been in post as interim CEO now for about 10 months, but I've actually been working for Involve as a former deputy for nearer 3 years. So very much focused on our communities, on mobilising our communities and on supporting our communities, especially under such difficult times as we've had during the pandemic. So I was asked to introduce today what's the impact been of the pandemic on our community, on our voluntary community sector. And for me, it's probably a story of two halves. Some charities and community groups have been very much disabled by the pandemic, therefore perhaps due to their core purpose, or due to premises closures, etc., they were required to cease their operations for often a very prolonged period. And as I'll come to later, some organisations still haven't managed to fully mobilise since the pandemic broke. But other organisations and community groups quickly were able to acclimatise, again, in accordance with their core purpose, and mobilise their workforce and their volunteer contingent to support those that were most vulnerable in our communities. And I think for me, that's where the voluntary community and indeed faith sector as well came into its own as the pandemic broke. We really did kind of break through, so to speak, lots of the barriers and mobilise our workforce at some speed in order to support the residents of Bracknell Forest. We saw an influx of local people wanting to offer their support as the pandemic broke. Approximately 1,800 local residents came forward and wanted to volunteer, wanted to help and support people that live within their neighbourhoods. And for me, that's a wonderful legacy for what was an extremely difficult time. We really saw the spirit of local people come through and want to support one another emotionally and practically. So what's the impact of mental health then, and how's that played out in terms of the voluntary community sector provision? Well, what we saw is lots of support move towards digital platforms and telephone, which of course for many residents worked satisfactorily. They were able to receive the support that they required. However, we know that other people struggled with that more virtual or long arm approach to receiving services. Some charities were required to cease their operations, as I said in my former slide, and for a period of time we saw significant disruption of service. And an example of that was, for example, therapeutic interventions that happened within schools due to school closures. But we saw that within adult services too, so it wasn't uniquely a children's service issue. What we also saw was a greater uptake of peer support groups as people looked at alternative ways in which to receive emotional support throughout the pandemic. And I have to say, I think peer support groups have really come into their own over the last couple of years. We've always known the incredible value that they bring, but actually, you know, what they do as well as they cut through geographical boundaries and really help to assist people at a time of need. So what's then the long-term impact of the pandemic on the local voluntary and community sector? Well, if I'm completely honest, I think that we're still currently unclear. We continue as the local infrastructure charity, or the Council for Voluntary Services as we're otherwise known, to really grip what the impact of the pandemic's been on local charities and community groups. As I said in a former slide there, some groups have been really decimated by the pandemic, whereas other groups have been able to evolve accordingly. This is what we know at this stage. We know that local charitable organisations have been heavily compromised in terms of income. You know, just thinking about things like membership fees, for example, they've not been able to run key activities that would generate income, and therein lays a financial pressure and an ongoing financial pressure, because although many of those organisations may have mobilised since the original lockdown or the second lockdown, it's left a lasting dent in budgets. Some community groups have not been able to return at all to deliver their services. And what we know is that physical environments to deliver services and support have been highly compromised. So lots of groups have found it quite difficult to find community space again in order to start delivering support. And lots of residents, understandably, have been particularly anxious about the notion of face-to-face support too. So therein lies a kind of dichotomy really about how do we best assist, how do we best reach out to people, how do we best emotionally aid and support. Some settings have required, or when I talk about settings now, I'm talking about physical buildings, for example, that we can host activities within, have required extensive COVID risk assessment, which of course is understandable, but therein lies a little bit of a problem for some people that are perhaps less familiar with that kind of assessment, and it's prohibited some of our groups from returning. So innovation and opportunity, I kind of want to be positive, because actually, as I say, what we saw during the pandemic was a real spirit of people, a spirit of local people, a commitment to reaching out to one another, to doing well by one another. And that was really globalized. It was captured nationally, but we really saw that within Bracknell Forest too. But what we have got is we've got some opportunities moving forward. We are delighted to have recently launched, very much in collaboration with Bracknell Forest Council, the Voluntary Community Sector Recovery Grant, which will see us give in excess of 200,000 to local community groups and charities, many of whom will be offering or will help with mental well-being. We've also seen the opening of our Stepping Stones Recovery College in the September of this year, which is a significant asset for the people of Bracknell Forest, and really helps it helps our residents to be able to learn skills and strategies that aid their emotional well-being into the future. So it's a preventative, if you like. We're looking at how we can upskill our residents so they feel more confident into the future to manage stress, anxiety, whatever other issues they may face. We have opportunities for new collaboration. I think an example of that is the Older People's Consortium, which I know some colleagues on this call may well be aware of. The Older People's Consortium is very much a collaborative. It's a collaborative of charities who have come together with a shared objective to make a difference to older people. We know that during the pandemic, and Age UK actually produced a really extensive report on this, that older people across the nation have been, what's the word I'm looking for, have been hugely impacted, both physically and emotionally by the pandemic. And that therein for us, really kind of laid an opportunity, and we really realized and recognized that there was a need for us to come together as a collective of charities that include Age UK Berkshire, involve the local day centres, the Red Cross and others too, the Art Trust more recently, coming together with that shared objective of trying to give confidence to our older people again, mobilise and give and enable them back out into communities through friendship and activity and genuine hand-holding in accordance with need. We've also seen a grassroots worker, or we're about to see a grassroots worker start with Involve fairly imminently. And of course, a grassroots development worker is not just an asset for our service specifically, but actually provides another resource in which we can go into communities. We can look at what is within, and we can look at how we can mobilise community groups again. We know that many groups specialise in supporting people with mental health issues. But that said, we know that singing, drama, all sorts, horse charities, there's all kinds of different things and opportunities that people can be involved in that are very healing and very good for people spiritually and emotionally, and really help with mental well-being. And what we're also doing to support the sector is we've actually initiated a grant writing scheme. So those groups and those charities that are less familiar with writing grant applications to external funders are being given some hand-holding support, some techniques. We're drafting documents for them that they can then use and mobilise into the future to generate funds for themselves. I will just stop sharing my screen for a moment. Lovely. So just to conclude then, we know that that our charities and our community groups that focus on mental health and mental well-being have had to acclimatise, as we all have, to the changes and the pandemic. We also know that we've seen new charities come through, such as the Recovery College, which in themselves are a huge asset now to the tapestry of support surrounding mental health across Bracknell Forest. And we are optimistic. We're optimistic into the future. We're optimistic that more can be done. We're optimistic that we can bring more colour and vibrancy into our communities again, and that we can offer more outreach, assertive support to the people of Bracknell. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip, for a passionate and very interesting opening presentation to the councillors. I have to say that being involved previously, as you're aware, involved, I'm a big cheerleader for the work that's actually done all year round. But I do think that, especially for what we're looking at the moment, your input is very valid. Do we have any questions that have come up from what's been presented? I'm just looking to see if anybody's got their hands up. Nobody's screaming at me at the moment. I'm just trying to think. Lizzie, you've got a question, if you like, and then Michael.
It was really good to hear you talking about mental well-being generally for the general population, and sort of colour and vibrancy returning. Are you noticing any particular sort of areas of sort of general interest that, as you say, are good, that are not sort of returning as quickly, or which have been more difficult to have continuity through the pandemic and may not return?
That's what we're working on now, Lizzie, to be frank. So my grassroots development worker is starting with the team on the 1st of December, and it's the priority for us is to look very much into neighbourhoods, and to review what was there pre-pandemic. We've done that landscaping work already, so we know what was within Great Hollands, for example, Great Hollands community or Harmers Water community, and we're going to do then that mapping exercise again, looking at what assets now exist within those communities, what hasn't come back, and then reaching out to the leaders. If we have those contact details, we have a lot of those contact details, luckily. So we'll reach out and see whether there's some assertive work that we can do to bring that back. And if it can't be brought back, and there is a gap in opportunity and in provision within our wards and our communities, we'll then look at whether or not actually we can nurture some new ambition.
That's really positive to hear. Thank you.
Michael Brossard, Councillor Brossard.
Yep, Mike, thank you very much for that. Phil, I'm going to say, really a question and observation. I think the first question that I've got, you mentioned, I think, about stepping stones and the Recovery College. We actually yesterday had a very, very impressive presentation by a couple of participants using Bernadette's laptop. Is that a separate section that you've actually got? Or the Recovery College, is that a new add-on, or is that part of the existing structure that you've got, Phil?
So the Stepping Stones Recovery College is very much led by Bernadette. So it is, and they're co-located actually at the courthouse. We're involved in the town centre. So they're centrally located, which is really good for our residents in terms of, public transport, etc. They are a new service. So they've only actually been up and running since the beginning of September. And we are working with them. We're doing as much as we can in terms of supporting them to optimise their delivery and to be all the more impactful to the people of Bracknell Forest. So it is new, but what you're talking about there, Bernadette, and the service users of Stepping Stones Recovery College is the new asset.
Oh, thank you for that, Phil. I must say a very, very positive response, I have to say, from the two participants who waxed lyrical about Bernadette's really, in terms of the engagement, the support that they received, and that was very much valued. Also, can I merely say, I must say, this is a plug really, can I say, Phil, for Sandhurst Day Centre, and the support that we get from Involve, and also the fact that you have this excellent writing application structure for those applications, those grant proposals. And of the 9 that were submitted by Sandhurst Day Centre, 7 of them have been approved thanks to your support. So I'd like to just put it on record how grateful we are. It sounds like a plug, and it is a plug for Involve. So thank you, Phil.
Thank you very much. Well, I have to say the local authority did give us some funding to support that particular post. But for the funding that was given, we've managed to generate in excess of 200,000 now in grants that we know about. So I think money truly well invested, and we hope to be able to keep this going beyond the next year or two. So thank you. That's a really great outcome, and I'm delighted for Sandhurst Day Centre.
I'm just looking around to see Michael, as you've spoken. Nick, do you have any questions you'd like to ask? Sorry to put you on the spot. I just want to make sure nobody's left out. Well, Nick's thinking, could you, is there any specific area that you'd like to sort of perhaps go into a bit more in depth for the committee, for the panel? Because there is such a broad range of what you've done, and you've given us an overview of the top. Is there anything else that you specifically like to tell us as a message or go into?
I guess the key message for me is that we still don't know a lot of things. If I'm honest, I think we still don't know what the full impact of the pandemic is. And people are talking about post-pandemic, but we're not post-pandemic. We're still very much living with COVID, and we know that there are significant anxieties out there for local people. There are some people that are very eager and very keen to get back out into provision again, get back out to their choir or whatever it was that they enjoyed within the community. But we have other residents who are particularly apprehensive and are still reluctant to go out of home. And it's quite a difficult situation, really, because the COVID rates don't support that message of kind of getting out and being productive again. And yet we're trying to get people to feel more confident to be able to go out. And it's important because, of course, we have the vaccinations now, and we want people to be able to live. It's important that people live with COVID. It's how we enable that. And I think that as a sector, we're doing well with it, and I think we work very well with statutory partners. But the more we can champion together, the more we can look out for our neighbours, and the more that we can do to build confidence for people, the better.
Yes, it's the. I'll just bring Lizzie. I just wanted to comment on what you've just said there. I'll bring you in a second, Lizzie. The fact that we're saying stay safe by not meeting people and getting COVID actually has a deleterious effect because of the fact if you don't meet people, then there's that catch-22. One of the things that has impressed me so much is the amount of volunteers that came out. And again, that's sort of like, so we've got a load of volunteers. How do we distribute those volunteers, what they want to do, when some of the existing frameworks have fallen apart because the people running those can't do that? And one of the reasons that this effect on mental health, this panel was put together, was to actually see if we could look at those different factors. Lizzie, can I bring you in and then Michael?
Absolutely. You could have almost been introducing my question. My question was about those volunteers who stepped up to be part of the sort of lockdown group to deliver medicines, make sure people had shopping. One of the interesting things we heard yesterday was not just the importance of peer support, which you yourself mentioned, but also the sense of purpose that these groups give people and the importance and self-esteem they get from going on to lead some of these groups or, be volunteers either in the service itself or elsewhere. And I wondered how many of those volunteers who sort of stepped up to deliver groceries, medication, etc., have stayed within sort of involved databases and been sort of directed to other voluntary opportunities that they can get involved with now that the lockdown is, you know, less of a crucial point.
No, absolutely. So, so it was very much a partnership with the ARC Trust. Many of you will be familiar with the ARC Trust, and of course, Bracknell Forest Council as well. So it's a true kind of collaborative. I know that there are hundreds. I think that the ARC Trust have got something like 500 volunteers still on their books. Many of whom are still offering services to people who aren't yet confident enough to be out and about, or that aren't out and about for a specific reason, specific health condition. So that work continues. What we have seen is we've seen an increase in what we call our volunteering pool. A volunteering pool is for residents who can't routinely volunteer, but have that spirit about them. They want to do something, but they work full time. So actually, to say that they do something every week would be too difficult for them. So what we did was we created this pool, and we DBS, and we go through the references, and we do all of the things that you would need to do in terms of good governance for trustees, and we give and we give opportunity, and we try to build community projects with them. So we'll say, for example, we've got a preschool that needs some assistance between, in the half-term break. We're looking for a group of volunteers to go in with us and repaint all of the rooms and cut back all of the bushes and all that different thing. And we'll put it out to the volunteer pool, and then we'll get people come back to us and say, yeah, you know what, I'm free over half-term, I'll come and do a day with you. And we build a team of volunteers that way. So we're still looking at how we can mobilize people that perhaps have gone back to work, and it would be too much for them to do something very routinely, but still have a commitment to wanting to do something in their community. So we're all the time, we're looking at ideas. We work with the Rangers, we're working with Silver Homes at the moment. We're working with a number of different stakeholders to give opportunity to people that want to volunteer.
I really like that flexibility. Thank you.
Michael.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Mike. I have to say, can I say, Phil, Zoom, you commented earlier on about Zoom, and I have to say it's working very, very well. I must say there's been no lack of clarity, no breakup, no mute, or can you hear me, etc., etc. A couple of questions, really. One observation, really, I suppose, on one question, Phil, is that the government have been very proactive in terms of providing grants to organisations, and I mentioned earlier on Sanders Day Centre. We've received grants both for the day centre and also for the shop. Are you able to police or really observe the government grants that are available to actually make those smaller organisations that might not be aware of the government grants that are available, to actually communicate them, really to encourage them to make those submissions? I just wonder if there are some very small organisations that might be oblivious of what is available to them. Do you receive all the government communications in terms of grant awareness, and can you disseminate that information to those minority organisations?
So we certainly receive an awful lot of communications. I can't be absolutely assured that we receive every opportunity that exists. But as you probably are aware, for anybody that signs up, we give weekly funding alerts, and we were particularly aware of the importance of communication during the 2 lockdowns. So we upped our community newsletters from once a fortnight to once weekly, and all of our sort of social media platforms as well. We were doing a lot of work on our social media platforms to bring advice and an opportunity to our charities and our community groups, and much of that was centred around funding, because we recognise, as we do today, we recognise that that organisations, that community groups would still have potentially outgoings, but would have a deficit in the incomings. So yes, we did do an awful lot of that. We continue to do a lot of that. I can't be absolutely assured that we capture everything, but we do as much as we possibly can in that respect.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for those questions. Couple of points from me, touching on platforms and the use of platforms. Forgive me if I'm asking you the same question in a different way, but has the move towards home working and more flexible working led to more volunteers being available? Because I know it's sort of from my viewpoint, the fact that I don't have to travel to so many meetings means that I can do more council work, the anorak that I am. Has that been reflected in what your in your experience?
Last year, we had 5,500 views of our online volunteer portal. So we hold lots of volunteer opportunities on the Get Involved portal, which is the portal that we use for our virtual volunteer centre. We also had about 230 something walk-ins too. So there's certainly an appetite to volunteer. I'm sure that the flexibility as you've described there does help people to be able to more readily volunteer. But if I'm honest, I think people are just trying to sort of grip and centre themselves. I think we'll probably see this in the coming months and the next year. I think, we've had quite a lot of disruption, haven't we, even up till kind of the sort of April of this year. And I think there's a lot of residents that were feeling quite fatigued and kind of needed a little bit of time for themselves. So I don't quite know how to answer that. I would say, though, that we've certainly seen a lot of interest for our volunteer portal. We'd almost have to do a survey of all local charities to find out whether or not they've seen a more considerable uptake in the volunteering that they've put on our platform.
That might be something that we can talk about off screen actually at some point, because I really must get to do a face-to-face with you at some point. Funny enough, the question that one of the questions we were referring to earlier about is the number of organisations that have folded or not able to continue. Do you have figures on this? I'm not asking for you to produce them now, but it'd be something that would help us in our looking at the effects of what's gone on.
We know,
or is the grassroots development worker going to look at that?
That's exactly what I was going to say. So we do know. No, that's absolutely fine. We do know sort of anecdotally that there are organisations who haven't come back, or who it may be that they can't come back. And that's one of the very reasons, as you just sort of suggested there, that we've got the grassroots development worker, so that we can do some assertive work, so we can reach out again and find out what's happened and whether there's anything that we can do, whether it be through looking for funding for them, looking for volunteers for them, looking for physical space to facilitate their undertaking. We're looking to break through any barriers that could potentially help them to come back, but we need to understand first and foremost the stories for each of them, and whether or not actually there's a simple solution, or whether it's a slightly more complex picture, and a greater level of assistance might be needed, and whether it's even appropriate. Because I suppose that's the other thing. I suppose one of the things that's happened with the pandemic is it has changed things, has shifted things. It's shifted the way in which many of us live. And as you know, for anything in terms of charity, the first thing we need to be focused on is purpose. What is our purpose? Is our purpose obsolete now, or is it very necessary? Has it never been more necessary? They're the questions that we need to ask ourselves as we begin this kind of, as we continue this recovery within our communities.
I'm going to take one more question from Nick, and I think that's going to be the last one before I make my finishing comments. So, Mr. Allen, Councillor Allen.
I think mine's a bit of a follow-up from the last discussion, in that I think you somewhat alluded to it. You saying whether these some groups may have had their time or whatever. I just wondered whether some of the groups that have gone away have been replaced by other groups that have emerged, doing a slightly different role, but essentially fulfilling the same purpose for the same people. And saying, you may I don't know whether that's part of the grassroots look to see whether whether the net is that we haven't actually lost anything, but we've actually gained overall.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what we're looking to rationalise over the coming 6 months or so. So what was there before? What is there now? Have we got new assets coming through? Have we got new talent there, that we can pull on to create new assets in the first place? And I think the answer to that is yes. We just need capacity, which is what unfortunately we've not had up until very recently. We need more capacity within our team to do that piece of work. And I'm really excited by that. And I think 2022 will be a good year for nurturing new ambition and to bring in that into our communities again.
Thank you.
Yes, Philip, that's excellent. I would like to set up a meeting with you at some point offline to continue some of these conversations. I have to say that was very useful, and I'd like to thank you for your appearance on behalf of myself and the other panel members for your appearance here. If we have any follow-up questions, I'm sure you'll be happy to receive them from Jen. And our reports hopefully will go through in February. We'll send you a link to the reports, make sure you're kept involved. Sorry, had to do it at least once. But yes, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to attend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Phil.